Welcome back to Chinese Food Fight Club. I'm Danica, and I'm here with my co-host Andy Wang out in LA. Today on our episode, we have a very special guest, and I'm so excited to talk to both Andy and our special guest about all the amazing things that they've been doing over the past 2 years. So, Andy, will you do the honors of introducing her?
Yeah, I'm so excited to have Crystal Coser here. And I guess the first thing I should say is that, I've read a lot about successful podcasts in the past and how a lot of them started just because people wanted an excuse to talk to their friends. And that's really like how Crystal and I start, why we started doing Clubhouse. And I mean, Danica, it's why we are doing our podcast. So I think that this is just a good way to sort of kick it off. So Crystal and I used to do very flowery introductions for each other on Clubhouse. I mean, it was like the sweetest introduction I'd ever gotten in my life, and hopefully vice versa. So didn't write anything, didn't rehearse anything because we've done it 20 times. But I should just say that we're here with Crystal Coser, a good friend of mine who used to be an associate editor at Eater LA. She runs a catering company, Bites and Bashes, with her mom, Chef Julie. They're truly A-list in terms of they've done things for the biggest tech companies and jewelry companies, and they've done things at Coachella. And I don't want her to break any NDAs, but I'm sure they're going to be doing crazy things for the holidays this year and for the Super Bowl and for Lunar New Year. And one holiday thing, which I think I can mention, out of many, just because multiple people have seen pictures of this, like Bites and Bashes has done Seth MacFarlane's holiday party on the regular. So that's just the level of what she does. They also have a cafe, Bites and Bashes, in the South Bay, where you can get her mom's sort of modern takes, but maybe that's the wrong word, but just her mom's versions of Korean food, because her mom is a Korean immigrant and got into food out of necessity. And now Crystal's sort of carrying the torch, but doing it because she can build this really 21st century business. And then we'll talk about Clubhouse in a little bit, but Crystal and I were just frequent dining companions, and it turned into a virtual thing during the pandemic because it had to. But that went kind of crazy, and some really good things happened. So that's kind of why we're here.
Welcome,
We'll
Crystal.
never stop being flattered by those introductions. So thank you, Andy.
You're welcome. Always.
We are so excited to have you here. And I have watched you guys do some amazing things over the last 2 years. I was in Hong Kong for a long time, and I was very much out of touch with what was going on in the United States in terms of all of the things we were reading about in the media. And it was heartbreaking to watch a lot of it, but then to see what people were able to do through community-driven projects, especially in the food community, it was incredible. So let's just back up and start from the beginning. Will you tell us a little bit about LA Food Gang? And I mean, you and Andy can do it together, right? You can tag team this, but let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about where it came from, how it got the name, and how you guys grew it into a grassroots community fundraising organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So LA Food Gang really is what it sounds like. It was just a group of friends who liked to dine out together. I met Andy when I was still an editor at Eater on a flight to Las Vegas. It was the first time we'd really had the ability to have a conversation. And on that trip and our many subsequent hangs after that, I realized that Andy was just the coolest guy I'd ever met. He had such a crazy, not only depth of knowledge about the food industry, but such a huge breadth on any topic, tech, crypto, whatever it may be. And he always knew everybody in the room, and it was so interesting to talk to. So when we got back to LA, we just started hanging out all the time. Our friend group kind of expanded. We'd go have these epic dinners. We like to call them bang bangs, where we go from one dinner to another, sometimes 5 dinners in a row. And that's really where it started, is just a group of friends who wanted to hang out all the time. And when that stopped in COVID, I was really sad, and I missed my friends who, we'd share meals with, and we'd have these amazing conversations. So when I found out about Clubhouse, I was really handling the majority of the front of house of my restaurant during COVID. And I had a lot of customer interaction. And this one guy would come into the restaurant every day with his phone up to his ear. It's like, what are you listening to? He was obsessed with this thing called Clubhouse. And he's like, oh, it's this really exclusive app. It's a great way to connect and meet people, especially during this pandemic. We can't be with each other. Let me send you an invite. It's a big deal. It's so exclusive, whatever. So I got onto Clubhouse, I started listening, but I was looking for content that I was interested in, which is, anything food related, and it really wasn't there. So I called Andy up and I said, hey, let's use this to get our friends back together. We can use this platform to have conversations and we can open it up to the broader public. And that was the start of it. I think we got onto Clubhouse like 4 days later.
Yeah, it was a thing where we did one test run and then we did another one. And then I think she called me on a Wednesday, and then on Sunday we did our first LA food.
Yeah, it was super fast.
And I guess we should back up a little bit and just talk about who some of these friends are, because I don't remember exactly who came up with LA Food Gang. I mean, it's not like it's such an original name, but I do remember that we were at a holiday party at our friend Hillary Eaton's family's Malibu house. And there was an artist, Napkin Killer, who, goes to parties. He's done this with NBA players and hip hop guys, and shows up at, just crazy holiday parties for people who hire him, where he would just draw images of you on a napkin. And it was me, Crystal, our friend Hillary, and our friend Tessa. We just happened to be there. And he's like, how do you know each other? What do I call you? And one of us said, well, I guess we just eat together a lot. And he was like, okay, you guys are the LA Food Gang. And so, yeah, we have these. I mean, I don't know who has the actual napkin, but we've all got pictures of the napkin. And that's sort of how it became christened a group. So, yeah. And then there were some, crazy nights in LA where, we would go eat 12 courses, and then Crystal would be willing to go eat tacos. Because honestly, that's the thing that I like about Crystal. She just goes so hard. So I guess we should tell one story before we get into, all the happy activism and all the stuff that we've done, because it really defines.
Yeah. So we had been speaking for a long time about taking a food gang trip to Angler, because we had a lot of mutual friends who worked there up in San Francisco before it ever opened in LA. So Andy had some commitment, so he told us he wouldn't be able to make it. So it was going to be a girls' trip of me, Tessa Nassau, and Annie Black, all amazing PR women in the food industry. So we had this great girls' trip. We get dressed up, we go to dinner at Angler. They give us an enormous table, which should have been a red flag, but I'm there with some amazing women. So, the red carpet was rolled out. I think we just get our cocktails, and someone comes up behind me to give me a hug, and it's Andy. And it was truly the greatest surprise of my life, because surprises don't really happen that way. And it was pure joy. I was so happy to see him. So yeah, we had an epic dinner. And of course, in true food gang fashion, we had a lot more meals lined up for us after that.
Yeah, so that was the first time we had gone to Angler, which, as you know, was this restaurant created by Josh Skeens, who had 3 Michelin stars at Cezanne. And it's just this restaurant that's built around this hearth and just essentially all this California seafood, right? So we ate scallops that were not from California. And, Josh was upset that I figured out that they weren't from California. But then we ate baby abalone, and we ate this ridiculous radicchio salad, and we ate risotto with truffles, and they sent out all these desserts, including this ice cream sundae. And it was just this crazy tasting menu. And then, of course, Crystal and the other ladies were just like, all right, where are we going next? So we went to a wine bar, we went to New Steakhouse, and ate like olive fed Wagyu and 4 other kinds of Wagyu and Wagyu jerky.
A steak dinner after Angler, after the wine bar.
Yeah, and it was like this totally like tech bro steakhouse too. Like it was this new thing, but you looked around and you're just like, I don't know if half of this is like seeking arrangement, and I don't know if half of these people are the investors. Where the fuck are we? There's this chef with like all these tattoos. He literally has like tattoos of beef, on his arms. It was just it's just crazy, like San Francisco, like, peak San Francisco moment. And at this point, like, we've eaten a lot, and Tess and Annie are just done. And then Crystal does her normal Crystal thing, which I'm going to let her explain.
Well, we were in San Francisco, and I did not want to leave San Francisco without having a proper burrito. I went to college in Boston, and in Boston, the late night food was either at this place called Noakes, Pinocchio's, or burritos. And those burritos at Felipe's were so amazing. And I always associate that with drunk eats, but in LA is not really a burrito town. So I really wanted to have my drunken burrito experience again. So I told Andy we had to go, and we had to go to the best place that everyone spoke about, because I didn't feel like our trip would be complete without it. So Andy and I went ourselves because the girls tapped out, and we ate burritos and nachos, and yeah, I mean, we took
We rolled up to El Farolito and we looked at the menu, and it's like we were just like supposed to get a burrito, and then like we see some people with like huge plates of chorizo nachos, and because it's Crystal, it's like, well, yeah, obviously we're also getting that.
Can we talk a little bit about, I know the answer to this, but I've worked in both fashion and food. So I've worked in the non-eating and the eating side of media. And I think that people who are professionals in the food industry eat in a different way than obviously normal people, but they eat even differently than greedy normal people. So can we talk a little bit about how you guys approach going to a city like San Francisco and just going ham?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I'm sure for all of us, all of my meals or all of my trips are planned around my meals. That's what I mean, I've always traveled for food since I was little. I was really blessed. I went to New Orleans when I was 8. My parents took me to New Orleans because I was obsessed with Emeril Lagasse. And that trip completely changed my life, really, because the chefs there were so welcoming and taught me. They brought us into the kitchen, me and my little brother, and taught us about food. And since then, all I wanted to do was travel for food. So I mean, I am an obsessive and super type A and organized. So I love to have my Excel doc of first all the restaurants I want to go to, and then I organize a schedule. And I mean, really, all I do is I make my meals count. I don't like to waste meals on hotel breakfast unless there's a reason.
It's great advice.
Yeah, so I save all the meals, and then I'll make sure that I can hit a couple restaurants in each meal period, and then have snacks in between, naturally.
So Danica, back when we were both at the New York Post and I was the travel editor for a bit, there's something that I always told writers, and I understand that this is partially because it's the New York Post, right? But I always told writers who are trying to figure out, like, I'm going to go to this festival, or I'm going to go to this thing where people are just really obsessed with Scrabble, or I'm going to go to Electric Daisy Carnival. How do you want me to write the piece? And I literally would always just look at them and say, the best travel stories are always stories about benders. It could be a TV watching bender with people that are obsessed with some other show, or it could be a rave, but this is what people want. They want that energy. They want to FOMO into something. So that's how I think about it when I'm doing these food stories. And, you know, like the San Francisco trip was fairly typical of me. I think I flew in, I landed at like 5:17 in like at the Oakland airport, and I flew out the next morning at 7 a.m. So this was it. This was my time. And I've definitely done stories where, you know, I've gone to a music festival or some food festival, and it was like 28 hours and I didn't even check into a hotel room. We used to do that stuff at the Post all the time. So I just feel like it's just this opportunity cost thing. Like, how much can you actually do? And in doing so, or in wanting to do so, you really just like make really tightly edited lists of the things that you should do. And the thing that I should also point out is some of the restaurants that I remember the most are the ones that I went to at the end of these seemingly stupid benders. And I remember them, like Zahav, this Israeli restaurant in Philadelphia that I've been to with, you know, Danica, our friends David Lanzel, Alex Bassick, my wife Erin. We've driven to Philadelphia just to eat there. The first time I ate there, I remember my dinner was at 9:30. I had already eaten 2 cheesesteaks, gone to Jose Garza's restaurant and eaten a tasting menu at some restaurant that isn't fucking there anymore. And I'm like full. I'm tapped the fuck out. And then I go to Zahav. I remember everything that I ate at Zahav, the Yemenite fish stew, the carrots, the eggplant. And so for me, it's just like when something's special, you still feel it, right? First time I went to Animal, I had already in LA, I had already eaten a whole Jose Andres tasting menu at Bazaar. And then I looked around at Animal, and like there's Zoe Saldana, like eating fried quail with her bare hands. And there's like all these like whip it thin, like male models that are there. And they're like eating, you know, foie gras and poutine. And I just get into it. And that was also one of my truly memorable meals, even though I had eaten at Bazaar, we had eaten at Lobster at Newport Seafood, we'd eaten Kogi tacos, like all within 20, maybe less than 24 hours, honestly. So it's just, this good restaurants still stand out after you've totally crushed yourself, you know, or at least they still do at this point in my life. So that's sort of the exciting thing, knowing that like, okay, the next thing could always be terrible, but the next thing could also be the best one. And that's, I think, like sort of the driving force.
I mean, that is the best advice I've ever heard as an editor to journalists, is that the best stories are about benders. And I think there's something about people who work in the restaurant industry and in food media where they just go hard. Everyone I knew, everyone I've ever met, I mean, for better or for worse, they just go really hard. And I want to bring this back to LA because I suspect that your bender approach is not exclusive to travel, because I know both of you guys and I've eaten in Las Vegas with both of you. And I think that there was one night where we actually went to 3 dinners in one night because we just couldn't scratch that itch that we were trying to scratch. I was about to die, but you guys were like, let's just keep going. Anyway, so let's bring it back to LA and let's talk about how you guys went really hard in a different way as soon as the pandemic hit. And I would love to talk a little bit about how LA Food Gang pivoted from real life dining experiences and doing the 5 dinners in one night to a really robust audio driven community on Clubhouse.
Yeah, I mean, everything was such a natural progression, and it was all, I mean, when we think about LA Food Gang, it's a group of friends, and our Clubhouse felt exactly like that. It felt like a virtual dinner table. So the intent was just to have a couple minutes at the beginning recapping our recent dining experiences as we would with friends in person. Then we would have a subject about pizza or tacos or whatever it may be. We had some amazing chef friends join as guests. But as there started to be a really shocking and horrific rise of hate crimes against the Asian community across the country, you know, it's just what we started to talk about as we would if we were in person with friends over a dinner table, and talking about why this happened and how this happened, and you know, what made the Asian community, I think, a little more susceptible to letting this happen in such a big way. I think a lot of times we internalize difficulty and struggles as a culture, and how proud we were to finally see people starting to band together and to talk about these hardships, because you know, a lot of times we feel so isolated when there is when we do feel struggles or racism, and it's really internalized. And to finally have a moment where everyone was talking about it, it was really powerful. And I feel really lucky that Andy and I could help in any way to help bring the word out to our food community and beyond.
The restaurant industry was already struggling, right? Like so many places had closed, right? And then so you throw all these struggles of the pandemic, and then like with this extra layer of racism, like we had friends at restaurants like Ricebox who told us that like people came into the restaurant just to like cough in their direction, right? Or there were prank calls like asking if COVID was on the menu, and just all of this shit. And then we turned it into this other thing where, you know, Crystal, our friend Yusai, who was part of LA Food Gang at the beginning, we did this fundraiser where we raised $60,000 on Clubhouse and got Wolfgang Puck and Ruth Reichel and all these amazing Asian American celebrities and activists, Lisa Ling, Margaret Cho, Jeannie Mai, et cetera. And that was all great. And it raised this awareness and it helped. But sort of to me, the legacy of LA Food Gang is just the fact that we have these closer relationships with a lot of these chefs and that they're still standing. You know, I was at Smorgasburg yesterday, and which is this big food market in Los Angeles, ran into a bunch of people, including the husband and wife, Maria and Marcel, who own Saucy Chick, who give us an inordinate amount of credit for helping them become part of Smorgasburg. I mean, we were just at best a tiny part of it. Like they did this, we didn't do this. But their point was just like the community that was built on Clubhouse, like connected them with the right people and gave them the confidence and the ability to do this. And then the biggest Clubhouse room that we did besides our fundraiser was one that was unanticipated, where it was just me and Crystal, nobody else. Like we didn't even get the chef on because at that point the chef didn't have an iPhone. And also it's like, I just didn't want to bother her. There's this famous restaurant in LA, famous because David Chang and all these other celebrities loved it, called Spoon by H. And, you know, the woman who owns this place, Yunjin Wang, is just extremely generous, kind, spiritual person. I don't even want to get into all this, but she's the type of person who more than most people I know believes in things, right? And during the pandemic, she just gave up because there are so many people scamming her restaurant and just like ordering a bunch of food and then charging it back to their credit card company. And it was just too much of her brain space and her time to fight this. And she just closed, right? And, and I'm not saying that like there's going to be happy endings to most of this, but this one was mostly sort of a happy ending in that, there's this Korean drag queen activist who was a friend of hers who ended up raising a lot of money via GoFundMe for her. We also did this clubhouse room, and more than, I think 200 people came to talk about how much they love this restaurant. And Yunjin still does not have a restaurant right now, but I saw her a couple weeks ago. She's still cooking for friends. She's gotten her energy back. She misses cooking. And so she's not gone. The community allowed her to sort of just stay and made her realize that a lot of people want her here and are here to help her. And we had nothing to do with the GoFundMe, but the reality is it's like, these are the type of things that kept happening during COVID, where people are just like, this is an injustice. We have a platform. Let's just use the internet and see what we can do for this person that we care about. I mean, that's like Spoon by H is a really, really, like well-known extreme example, but those chargebacks and all these things and the racism, and it's been happening to lots of places. So like, yeah, we have to keep going with it, I think, on and off Clubhouse.
Something that I so appreciated as a restaurant owner about Clubhouse is a lot of times when you're running a restaurant, you have blinders on because you work such long hours and it's, you're so exhausted and you don't often have the time to go out and socialize with other people in the industry the way that I used to when I was a journalist. So you're not really talking about struggles and coming up with solutions as a collective restaurant industry community, when there could be a lot of shared insights and problem solving that could be done together. So when we started talking about chargebacks, I mean, that's the first time that that really had been discussed as a real problem in our industry. And I, as a restaurant owner, had recently been scammed thousands and thousands of dollars. So to have those conversations with other people, one, you don't feel so alone and, you feel like it's only happening to you, but we were able to come up with some protocols and ways to help approach this issue in a way that was helping us to move forward and just to have like a little bit of comfort and community. It's really hard being a restaurant owner, and to be able to talk with other chefs and business owners about the issue and many others moving forward, I found to be so helpful and comforting in a pandemic that is so isolating.
The other thing that was so great about this, that Crystal's hinting at, but we should just say explicitly, right? I mean, Crystal obviously runs an immigrant-owned business with her family. And so many of this new, like so many members of this new generation, right, have similar stories, and they just don't realize it because they haven't really talked to each other, right? I mean, Crystal obviously worked in media. Justin at Anajak, who's running the most interesting and honestly most buzzing Thai restaurant in LA right now, we got to know because of Clubhouse, took over the family business after like a really successful graphic design career where he's worked at places like Disney. I mean, Yunjin Wang at Spoon by H was a classically trained musician. So the stereotypical story of like these businesses basically being run by a bunch of immigrants who like had no other choice, I mean, it's fucking bullshit and false right now. But the thing that a lot of these people realize is that like they're so lucky that they get to make this choice because the prior generation didn't. And I mean, that's why I sort of want Crystal to talk about her mom and how this really happened, right?
Yeah, and I love that about Clubhouse because we really were able to bond over this shared experience. So for my family, my mom grew up in South Korea, extremely poor. So her mother, my grandmother, moved to Los Angeles and opened a burger stand in the port of Long Beach. We have no idea how she did it. She never spoke English. I don't know how she knew what a burger was or knew how to make it, but it was really successful. They had a line down the block. So they were able to pay for my mom to immigrate to Los Angeles as well. And she helped my grandma run a couple restaurants in Los Angeles. But it was a grind and really hard work. I mean, I hear stories of them getting to the restaurant at 5 a.m. And then it was also a bar at night. So staying there till 1 a.m. and having to clean. And it's just a brutal cycle that never stops. When I was growing up, some of my aunts were still in the industry and everyone was just so tired. So my mom sold the restaurants when I was young and always told me that she never wanted me to be in the restaurant business, that she was sending me to good schools and I had to study hard so that I could be a doctor or lawyer. And like, that sounds like such a stereotypical tiger mom Asian thing to do. But I mean, they only did that because they struggled so hard and, you know, the restaurant life is grueling. But of course, when you grow up in a family where restaurant is in your DNA. And, you know, my mom still loved to cook and host dinner parties. And I was just raised in the kitchen. Like that was my family environment. We all were so passionate about food. You know, when I was 15, I wanted to get in the business and I started my first catering company because you just live and breathe restaurants and you just have such a passion for it. And I mean, I did get an econ degree and like I did all these other things and I had other options, but I still chose to start my own business. And it is so hard. Like they're not wrong that it's grueling, but you do it because you love it. And that's really such a blessing. Yeah, I feel so lucky to be able to have that choice because our parents didn't. Like they didn't speak the language. What really were they able to do in the States besides cook if you can't really communicate with in any other way besides with the food that you can make for people?
Did you ever have to have the talk with your mom about, Mom, we're going to open a restaurant? and what was that like? And what was her reaction? And how did you convince her to get back into the business?
Yeah, there was a lot of talks. I can tell you there are few ways to disappoint your parents more than for them to send you to a great school, help you pay for it, and then you graduate not going to law school, not going to med school, not in finance and consulting, which was the big thing. Everyone was going into finance and consulting. And I was like, hey, I want to go into events and food. Yeah, that was not great. They weren't super stoked about that. But, you know, they came around and they understood that that was my passion. It was theirs too. They bred that into me. And I just have really supportive parents who helped me along the path and supported me when I really needed it because I didn't know what I was doing. So yeah, I had to learn. And she supported me so much that she decided to be my business partner. She's an incredibly talented chef. I'm so lucky to be working with her.
I love this story so much. And I think there's so much that resonates with, I think all three of us are first generation immigrants in the United States. And I think there's something that really resonates between the immigrant story, the restaurant entrepreneur story, and also just the Asian American story overall. That what you mentioned before about everyone living in silo, everyone sort of, internalizing problems and perhaps not coming together as a community as much as they could to solve things, like you said, in the restaurant community and in the Asian American community. So that is why I think it's so impressive what you guys ended up doing, taking LA Food Gang from an informal dining club to a clubhouse room, raising tons of money. And then you guys decide to do a real life event. So let's talk about Pop Off LA and how that came about and what happened. I was not lucky enough to go, so please describe in vivid detail.
So this happened because of the generosity of a lot of chefs who were already, like struggling and just wanted to do more. We did an online fundraiser and I had all these chefs reach out. What can I donate? What else can I do? And I was just like, yo, I've had separate conversations with you about how your business is down 85% right now and you can't pay for your nanny anymore. I don't want you to give any money. I don't want you to give any food. I can't stop you, but if you ask me what to do, I'm going to tell you to do nothing and just go back to your restaurant and let me order food from you, right? So there are all of these, Asian-owned restaurants, Rice Box, Anna Jacques, Miss Chi, who just, we had become close with. And we decided to do a live event because Cindy Thompson, who has this great space. It's essentially a ghost kitchen incubator in downtown LA in the Arts District called Crafted Kitchen. donated some money during our first fundraiser. She has, a lot of API chefs and creators in her space, and just said, look, if there's anything that I can ever do for you, like, let's not wait. I have the space. This is the time. This is the occasion. Let's just do this. Right. And she offered the space. It ended up growing to this crazy thing where we had spaces all over the city. We had Roy Choi's Kogi and David Chang's Major Domo involved. We had Yubo, the most prominent chef in Chengdu, do a pop-up. We had people from Tacos 1986. And it was just a couple weekends of crazy live events. But the way that we set it up, although some of these chefs defied me and just ended up donating all of the money because I can't stop them, was this is not a food festival. Food festivals exploit you and rip you off and take your labor and your food and leave you with nothing except 2 Instagram posts and an in-book feature in a magazine that may not be solvent next year. So fuck that. Sell your food. We'll donate money on top of that. We'll raise awareness. And that's what we did. And the thing is, it's like a lot of these chefs are now just connected forever. And that's the part that makes me feel good. We recorded with Shirley Chung recently, and she mentioned that, some of her favorite restaurants are Moo's Craft Barbecue, Anna Jack Thai, Rice Box. And those were connections that were made because we did Clubhouse and because we did Pop Off LA. And I mean, Shirley even said that. So that's what I kind of love about it. We did this one collaboration. We set up these chefs for one collaboration, and now they talk to each other all the time, and and we can't stop them from doing other collaborations, and they're just going to do it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same takeaways as you did. It was great that we raised, tens of thousands of dollars over the course of all the events we did for LA Food Gang. And just to speak to that money, it went to this amazing organization called Off Their Plate, which I've been working with really, I think since April 2020, so right at the onset of the pandemic. And they do this amazing thing where they'll raise money, donate it to small minority-owned restaurants who then use those funds to create meals for either, at that time it was hospital workers, and then later when we were doing it for the Asian community, they would donate the meals to Asian American community organizations, and the funds were going to Asian-owned restaurants. So to see how many meals we were able to provide and how many restaurants we were able to support, that was so amazing. And Petit Peso was helped a lot in Los Angeles, but it wasn't just in LA, it was across the whole country. But for me too, the biggest takeaway was being able to see the lasting connections and the community that we really helped to foster in Los Angeles, because there really wasn't a way for restaurant owners to connect in that way and share struggles. And yeah, I love spending time with Justin from Anajak and Royce and Jesse from Burmese Please, who I did a collaboration with. Those friendships are lasting, and that was really special. And I love that we were able to do that.
And since then, and we'll announce some of this in future episodes, just mainly because, this was a grassroots thing that ended up getting so much attention, local print media, local online media, but also national and worldwide media. Coverage in Korea, coverage all over Asia, some things got picked up in Europe. Some things were on national TV, like on ABC. And it was just this whole thing where we got a lot of attention, and then other people started reaching out, people from city government, people from huge, food conglomerates that are based in China that want to do things. So I think that this is going to allow us in the future to help advise people with lots of means how to deploy resources to help the API community and API small businesses. So yeah, and I think that, next year we did this, last year we did it in May, next year we may do it again, but we may do some different version of it. It may be an online auction, involving an NFT, or maybe something where we mobilize people in other cities. That's kind of the thing about it. That's after doing Clubhouse, it made us realize that we can reach a lot of people just sitting in our little home office, dimly lit with our phone. And so there's lots of other things that we can do. And we're very much in touch with a lot of these chefs. A lot of them are going to be part of Chinese Food Fight Club podcasts in the future. So I'm excited about it. another thing that we loved about LA Food Gang was that like how we just kept things real, right? We talked about wanting to amplify voices, but we talked about mental health, and we talked about the physical grind of opening a restaurant and then closing it and opening it again and then closing it again and then opening it again and wanting to give up, but then realizing there's absolutely nothing else that you want to do more. So, you know, we talked a little bit about the glamour, but I want to talk a little bit about the grind. And I think Crystal is a great person to talk about both. So tell me about some glamorous party, whether it's Beats by Dre, Coachella, or something else, where it seems like the coolest thing that everybody wants to be at, but it's also this thing that involves whatever, your mom having to wake up early and drive from grocery store to grocery store because she realizes, holy shit, we need more food. Tell me a
Yeah.
story like that.
I mean, behind every glamorous party, there is some horrific shit show that's going on. And, you know, we call catering the SWAT team of the events industry because you never know what situation you're going into. You're not working in your own kitchen. Something inevitably goes wrong. So I have stories for days. So, I mean, the story you're referencing is when we catered the Beats by Dre parties at Coachella. We have been working with Beats by Dre and doing all their holiday parties for many years. And when they asked us to do 3 days worth of events at Coachella, I mean, that's a challenge in itself because it's, you know, 2.5 hours away. We had to get a house. We had to get our team to go out to Coachella, which is a busy weekend in itself because everyone wants chefs to be out at Coachella. But it seemed totally manageable. It was supposed to be 40 people for a family style dinner for their VIPs Friday night, and 250 people both Saturday and Sunday at this enormous, gorgeous estate right across the street from the festival for a private party. So fine. So the 40-person dinner goes pretty great. I mean, they just run 2 hours behind schedule, which is hard when you want to have perfectly hot, crispy fried chicken and, you know, perfectly plated salads that don't get soggy, but that's normal caterer struggles. That's fine. You just adjust accordingly. So then the next day, we have a bunch of food stations for 250 people. It's at an enormous estate, which has its own problems because our kitchen is so far away from the food station. It's like 110 degrees. It's so hot outside, but fine, again, normal caterer struggles. So the event opens at 11. Everything, you know, is ready to go, seems to be going well. But by 11:45, something is clearly wrong. Our food is we're unable to refill the food fast enough. I was in a little black dress that I always wear when I'm at events, and I am huffing like 20-pound bags of ice on either side, running over to the food stations to try and keep things cold. We had like also a boozy snow cone station. I am dripping in frozen water and sweat and trying to refill all the buffets because we don't have enough staff for the rate of food that is getting consumed. So then my kitchen is telling me that we're almost out of our food for Saturday and that they started to dip into our food for Sunday. And that if it kept going at this pace, we were going to be out in an hour of all the food we had prepared for the weekend. So I talked to the event staff and they're like, oh yeah, we're hitting 2,000 guests. 2,000. So we always over prepare. So instead of food for 500, we probably had closer to like 900. But that was a little bit of an underestimation. So we send our chefs to grocery stores to get what we can to try not run out of food, but you know, it's impossible. And so we still have a bunch of celebrities asking for special plates to be made and brought to their table. So Erykah Badu wants the vegan taco plate that I have to run over to her because now we're doing basically table service for VIPs. And we managed to make it through the day. I mean, we don't have a scrap of food left. We do all the grocery store runs that we can. But everyone is sunburnt and exhausted and sweating and just, it was so, and your legs shake because they're so tired from running and huffing food back and forth. So we went home. It was too late to go shopping. We sent out more chefs from LA the next morning. My mom wakes up at 6 a.m. to go to grocery stores to buy food for thousands of people and start over. So we had everyone, I mean, all the prep we had done, it was all gone. All the salsas, all the meat fabrication, like everything was decimated. But it was, you know, Coachella is always in April and it was Easter Sunday. So all the stores that we would normally go to were closed for the day. So she's going from place to place in full panic mode. We're all like on our phones, Googling where to go. And she found a Food for Less that was open. She had never been to Food for Less before. Goes inside, goes all the way down to the meat counter and tells them she wants to buy every piece of meat that they have, which was funny and surprising to them. But yeah, we brought all the meat back. We started from scratch. And prepared for 1,000 people and fed who we could. So yeah, I mean, that's one of millions of stories. I mean, I have stories where we fed President Clinton and the Secret Service did a last minute bomb sweep for an hour before doors opened and kicked us out of our kitchen. So I had my team move the tables for our kitchen to the streets of Bel Air, like literally in the middle of the street. So we could still prep before doors opened. And then, I mean, it was a long story, but President Clinton was a vegan. It was supposed to be Hillary Clinton. So the menu was completely different. And there was a Secret Service and the bomb sweep. And yeah, he's a great guy, though. He came to the kitchen to thank Mom. Mom wasn't there because she was dancing to Lionel Richie, but oh well, it was a great time. So many stories.
Yeah. So how busy are you now? I mean, given the fact that we're still in a pandemic, but like everybody wants to party again, right? Like you're probably crazy now too.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you, being a caterer during a pandemic, I mean, restaurant owner alone, but being a caterer where people just have different comfort levels with group gatherings, it has been the craziest roller coaster. I can't imagine my business being any crazier because it went from, I mean, right before the pandemic in winter of 2019, we worked every single day until Christmas. I think we calculated that we fed something like 50,000 people of my little team. I mean, we were still small at that time. And I mean, just every day we thought we were going to die of exhaustion because we did those celebrity holiday parties that would go until 4 a.m. And I would go back to load them out, but we'd be at the next celebrity or, you know, mansion party the next day or corporate holiday party for 1,000 people. It was just nonstop every single day. There's huge parties. And then the pandemic hit and we had to lay off half of our staff. As soon as we got PPP, we hired as many people back as would come back and who felt comfortable. And we were just pivoting so much and providing meals for healthcare workers just to give our staff something to do and creating family meals. I mean, the amount of energy it takes to come up with family meal packages for 2 people or 4 people, new menus every single week, new items, new packaging, just the creative energy and the drain for really, I mean, no money. Like you don't do it to make money. You do
right.
it.
You're selling a $69 meal kit when your business is used to doing $100,000 parties. I mean, I actually really want to quantify this.
Yeah. I mean, you just do it because you want to keep your community close. You want to have your customers. I wanted to keep my staff in work and I wanted them to stay with me. I mean, we're such a tight knit family. So we went from that to, I think like March of 2021, when things seemed to be going much better. Then our business, I could see from the back end, our inquiries tripled from our 2019 peak. So from holiday planning 2019, it was triple. So which is a whole struggle in itself because now I needed to double my staff. I was working in the office till midnight every single day with my little team, which I needed to triple, but you still need to hire people and interview them and get them to quit their jobs and come over. So there was a couple months where it was brutal in the other way. We were too busy and had too much business as not only were private people ready or private clients ready to party, but corporate companies at that time felt more comfortable. So we were doing all these huge events just like we used to, and it felt like the glory days. And then there was Delta. And some of the biggest events I had ever booked in my career canceled just a few days later. We had booked this Grammy nomination conference for 6 days. I mean, I could go on and on about the endless events that we booked that then canceled because the corporate companies didn't want the liability. And here I was, I had just hired twice the amount of staff. And now I'm nervous that I won't sustain, but now things are getting busy again. So it's so crazy. And there's no way to predict the future. And my staff always wants me to. They want me to hire more. They want me to prepare for them or order more things or have more inventory. But I don't know the future. And it's so hard as a business owner to know how to best take care of your company and make sure it's viable and sustainable when you don't know what tomorrow holds. So it's been so hard as a company that specializes in large gatherings to survive during the pandemic. It's been, just a little stressful.
Can we talk a little bit about your time as a journalist and whether, as a journalist, I mean, obviously you had grown up in the restaurant industry, but had anything working in food media prepared you for the reality of working in the business inside the industry, owning a business at all? I mean, it's been a wild time, but were there any moments where you were like, oh, like food media may or may not actually know what's going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, what I have realized since leaving food media is how grave the disconnect can be between media and the restaurant owners and the realities of a restaurant business. And I think the best journalists are able to close that gap. And that's just by having real conversations with the owners about the realities and the struggles of operating a restaurant and not just reading press releases. I think that's why Andy and I bonded so much, is because he really understood. And I mean, I think I tried to come at food media with a different perspective, because I did run restaurants in college. I had management experience, so I knew what it was like to work in the kitchen and to have things go wrong or to get surprise bills when your walk-in doesn't work, which is all the time. There's always refrigeration problems. It's so expensive and stuff, which is the bane of my existence right now, is just these surprise maintenance bills that you get all the time, and the struggles of hiring people and training people. And you want to pay a fair wage, but it's really hard to make a living when margins are so super thin, especially when you're having like a small mom and pop restaurant business, like, and you're not corporate. It's hard to give people the benefits that you want without charging prices that people find to be egregious. So I really approached my time at Eater trying to share those stories, and those relationships that I made. For example, the two ladies from Love to Eat. Love to Eat is this Thai restaurant on Sunset Boulevard that was 2 blocks from my old office in Hollywood. So I just started to go there all the time, and I had traveled to Phuket, so I had a little bit of knowledge of Southern Thai food, and we just became super close. And I started writing about them on Eater LA, and they were just, I mean, this tiny establishment that was really slow all the time. And to be able to see how their business exploded, and they ultimately ended up being on the Eater LA's Essential 38 restaurant. And I mean, I saw them open so many more restaurants, and even now they're trying to open more restaurants. Being able to foster those relationships and help these small businesses was the most rewarding experience I had there, but also really beneficial for myself. I mean, we kind of touched on this earlier, but when you work in restaurants, sometimes it's really hard to leave and dine out because you are working in peak hours. Like, you can't go out to dinner all the time because you need to be, like, for me, I'm at events or people, they're doing their dinner shift. So how can you see what other people are doing? You really get insular into your own world. And I ended up catering my good friend Matt Kang, who's the editor of Eater LA. I ended up catering his wedding because he said that I was able to come approach catering from a different point of view, because I did have such a breadth of knowledge when I was at Eater. I was able to eat at all the best restaurants in Thai Town and Koreatown and French restaurants. And I mean, I was able to experience everything that LA has to offer. And if you do want food that's a little more diverse and multicultural, sometimes it's hard for caterers to do that with honesty and authenticity, because they haven't really had those experiences that we're so lucky to have as food journalists. I mean, we can experience the best of the best and the whole gamut of what LA has to offer.
I do think that that is one of the greatest responsibilities of food journalists and people who work in food media, is to use their power to shine a spotlight on restaurants that they truly believe in their heart of hearts are amazing. And Andy and I our entire first episode is about how we spent years evangelizing a neighborhood Chinese place in New York City. And this is
dying to go to.
it's over. It's gone.
Yeah.
It's too late.
Yeah, we're gonna have to open it now.
I think we're gonna have to do like a revival. We'll do like a pop-up, and we'll get that chef. He'll be like, "What are you guys? Who are you guys?" He probably has no idea that we've been talking about it for 10 years. But I think that is a huge responsibility for people who work in food media to think of themselves as part of the restaurant industry. That is at the core of it. you have to support your people.
Mm-hmm. And I think it really is the duty of the journalists to speak to the restaurant owners and to speak to the ones who don't necessarily have the budget to afford PR to speak on their behalf. So you really have to be proactive about it, because there's no one fighting for them and no one telling their stories. You know, I mean, I have so many, and Andy has millions of stories of chefs that we were able to support over the years. And for me, like a really special story that I had was Charles Alalia, you know, who had Mamser and Rice Box. But I met Charles when I was at Ternea in Palos Verdes, has a fine dining restaurant called Marcel. At that time, he was the executive chef of Marcel, doing, you know, fine dining, hotel food. He's Filipino, kind of like put little touches here and there, but there's only really so much you can do. And I was speaking to him when I was at that dinner, and he's like, hey, there's a passion project that I'm starting. I really would love to share it. Los Angeles doesn't know anything about Filipino food, and I really want people to learn the food of my culture. It's just not a part of the conversation. So he started doing these pop-ups in an apartment in downtown LA that I was able to do a full story on, like just little pop-ups in an apartment. It's definitely not legal. And I was able to do full stories in Eater, and he was selling them out. And eventually he got so much momentum and such a fan base for his pop-ups that he opened his first restaurant downtown, Rice Bar. Wait, Rice Bar?
Rice Bar, yeah.
Yeah, Rice Bar, which is now Petit Peso, which is, I mean, given that we helped them through OTP, it feels really full circle. But he was able to open Rice Bar, got so much crazy national press. I mean, 10 best new restaurants in the country, like all this crazy press.
It was like an 8-seat restaurant.
Yeah.
And GQ went there. You know, it was just crazy stuff like that. You know, Bon Appetit went there.
The beginning of the Filipino food movement really across the country. So it was so cool to be able to share those stories and, you know, be proactive about doing that. And I just think I'm not really on the media side anymore. And I just hope that people continue to do that. And again, that's why I respect what Andy does so much.
I mean, this is one of our biggest goals. I think so much of these restaurant lists are, yes, they come from publicists, like calling up journalists and saying, this is going to be the hot new opening. You have to do this. Like, this is going to be, you have to put this on the list, because otherwise you're going to look like you're left out when everyone else has them on their list. But a lot of the best finds from these lists that all these mainstream publications put out, I know because we used to put them out too, comes from word of mouth. And how do we do word of mouth? It is through stuff like creating podcasts and through Clubhouse and through dining clubs. And literally it's like a game of telephone that goes from the West Coast to the East Coast and hopefully touches down on land somewhere in between. I do think that that's one of the biggest challenges with media, is having touch points in the Midwest and in the South. But yeah, I think I agree with everything.
Well, good. I think we're all on the same page about our duty as journalists.
Yeah, and I think that, like, even when you move past being a journalist, you still just have this desire, and you'll never stop having it, where you want to amplify things. I mean, Danica, you and I and a lot of the other people who've been very, very lucky to write for a living and on some level are doing that. A lot of us are, you know, to use that stupid Felix Salmon term from years ago, like a lot of us are like, in some ways, post-text, but text is still the best way to tell certain stories. And so we do it because it's really not about us and whether we're tired of it or because we want to do it. It's because there's always new things to amplify that we care about. I mean, and thankfully, you don't always have to do text. There's now, you know, Instagram and TikTok, and there are now podcasts and Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces and all these things. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that there's lots of different ways for these things to be amplified. But yeah, every once in a while, writing some story, turning it in, it can have a huge impact on something that you think matters. And that's still a good feeling.
I do think that probably now in 2021, still the most powerful digital story format is the listicle. And I know that all three of us had made lots of listicles. And at some point, all of us were like, we want the listicle to die. But the list, whatever list people Google and keep in their phone or screen grab, that is such a powerful tool. And I think, you know, I read a lot of listicles. So speaking of listicles, I think that Andy has a quick fire round to wrap up this call.
All right.
Yeah, let's end with listicles.
I
I
love
mean, I
it.
know you don't get that much time to go out, but if you were to recommend places, like what are 3 restaurants that you love in LA right now?
I mean, that's such a hard question. If we're talking about my comfort food and the place that I go to, I mean, whenever I can, for me, that would be Myeongdong Kyoja in Koreatown for so many reasons. I mean, one, I don't know what's more comforting than knife cut noodles and a garlicky broth with that crazy kimchi. And to me, I mean, this is very controversial, but they have my favorite dumplings in Los Angeles. So they're Korean mandu, but they're folded in like a, I mean, not in a typical mandu way. They're kind of like xiaolongbao bao a little bit. They're super juicy. And to me, it's so comforting. What's interesting is I fell in love with the restaurant not knowing that the original location in Seoul was somewhere my mom went. And she didn't even realize that it had been in Koreatown. So that's a really special restaurant for my family. And I love taking visitors there because I think it speaks so much. It's 24 hours, which isn't really a thing so much in LA. So to find those places that I can roll up to at any time of the night. I mean, besides my favorite taco trucks, Andy introduced me to El Flamin' for the most gluttonous chicharron fried quesadillas, which is probably the most epic drunk eats. Um, God, what else? For celebration restaurants, I love Mozaplex still. I think you can never go wrong with their pastas there, or at Angelini or Bestie or Pavel. I mean, I can go on forever. It's hard to give the highlight.
So, if and when things get to whatever we recognize as the future normal, and we get to go back and we get to go do another trip somewhere, given that we've gone to San Francisco and Miami and Vegas, where do you want to go and where are we going to eat first?
Yeah. I mean, I first of all, I feel like we've been so blessed to be able to have some of our bang bang traditions during these crazy years, or year and a half. We had the most epic dining trip in Miami. It sounds like there's so much more to do there, but I think we've discussed for many years finally doing food gang hits Mexico City. And I think that we have a lot of friends who would be really helpful and would love to do that trip with us. I'm thinking of Bill Esparza, the Taco King. He is one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met, and I'd love to do Mexico City with him. I was lucky enough to do Valle de Guadalupe and have an amazing meal in wine country. But yeah, I'd love to do Oaxaca and Mexico City with our crew.
Yeah, and then we can get into the fact, like, if we go to like Mexicali in certain places, we can get into the fact that, like, oh, there's a lot of restaurants here that are actually run by Chinese immigrants, and
Yeah.
everything is more connected than you think. So yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Bill loves to talk about how much crossover there is between Mexican and Chinese cuisine, and he loves talking about salsas versus like spicy broths and sauces. So I'd love to explore that more as a group.
Fun fact, I think that way, way back in the day, I think that when like all the earth, all that land mass was connected, Mexico was attached to China, and specifically Korea was also there. So there's a lot of eerie similarities that have
Yeah,
stuck around in both land
yeah,
masses.
yeah. We were talking a lot about chilies and peppercorns and just spice. And I mean, they're on opposite sides of the planet, but the fact that there's so much overlap, I mean, there's so much to explore there.
So exciting. Crystal, where can people find you on social media?
I'm at Crystal Coser. I don't write anymore, but I like to post a lot about our epic food journeys. So Crystal Coser, Coser.
Thanks, you guys. Everything will be in the show notes below. Thank you so much, Crystal, for appearing on Chinese Food Fight Club. We loved having you, and we hope you'll come back again when you guys do your next LA Food Gang thing, or when Bites and Bashes does holiday season.